this is the most dire and most immediate threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm, period.
Hey guys, thanks so much for joining us. I have back on the line the one and only Dane Wigington. He's a researcher, activist, and founder of Geoengineeringwatch.org. He also has GeoWatch Radio, which is absolutely commercial free. He pays for it out of his own pocket for the benefit of all of humanity. He's a leader, and boy, do we need real leaders right now as the elite bring humanity to their knees. Dane Wigington, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for all you do to try to sound the alarm, and it certainly needs to be sounded. We're much further into the curve with many issues that are very dire than people realize yet.
Well, thanks for that, Dane. But you know what? I need to do more because, unfortunately, you and I haven't spoken. Would you believe it's been exactly 1 year? I believe we posted our last interview on April 20th, 2015. So it's been almost a full year. Dane, are things better now than they were a year ago, or are they worse?
Far, far worse. And this is where, again, people's normalcy bias is so profoundly impacting their willingness, their ability to look at the horizon, Sean, and see what's surrounding us on every side. I mean, we have converging catastrophes, and people are simply buried in their normal routines and are not looking at what's unfolding around them. The fact that biosphere is virtually collapsing on countless fronts, and the assault against what's left of the biosphere is immense, and with climate engineering being at the top of that list. But that is in no way to discount the fact that the human race has not been very good stewards of our planet, have they? So it's not just the criminally insane and psychopathic global elite that are to blame here. We need a population to wake up and start to do their part to turn the direction of the ship that we're all on, which is sinking by the day. So again, I think as we discussed off air, the die-off of the Great Barrier Reef, 50% of what's left of the reef dying in 30 days. 30 days, the geologic blink of an eye. And we have die-offs in every front, from boreal forests to fish to whales. Bees, are collapsing. We know the bees die-off is now directly linked with climate engineering, which is what we've said at Geoengineering Watch the whole time, Sean. For the last 10 plus years, we've communicated to some of the head bee people that there was a much bigger issue than glyphosate, that the bees were dying from the fallout from geoengineering, and now we have peer-reviewed study to prove aluminum is killing the bees, and we know where the aluminum is coming from. So from every front, Sean, people are asleep at the wheel right now. We need to wake them up.
All right, well, let's back up just a little bit for new listeners, because if you're just joining this broadcast now, Dane, in this whole topic of geoengineering and climate warfare, climate engineering, if that's new to you, then this type of information is completely shocking, because you're talking about an extinction level event. In fact, you're talking about the extinction of multiple species already occurring. So let's just back up. How did we get here, Dane? How did this happen?
Well, we've lived under a paradigm, Sean, where people think that you can continue to grind up nature for a profit and not have repercussions. And in order to keep that, quote, business as usual, some 70 years ago, those in power decided they needed to engineer the climate. Now, there's no benevolence in climate engineering, none. It's malevolent in nature, period. It's about power and control, period. But in order to keep the paradigm going, in order to mask the true severity of damage being done to the planet and the climate system, without our knowledge, without our consent, those in power in about the mid-40s, that's historical documents back this up, they decided to begin engineering the climate, starting with over the poles, spraying light-scattering particulates to block some of the sun's incoming thermal energy. This is stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, to fill the sky with unimaginably small particles, again, to block some of the sun's incoming heat. It's called solar radiation management. So the climate system has been derailed for some 70 years and getting worse all the time. And the attempt to play God with the weather, Sean, I think we can all imagine the folly that would come with that. How many things have we tried to do that with the human race, to alter organisms, to genetically modify organisms, and now we really live on a genetically modified planet. I mean, they've completely derailed Earth's life support systems. The more damage they do, the more they spray. and this is with jet aircraft spraying particulates into the atmosphere. Those particulates are manipulated with radio frequency transmissions. Many of your listeners, Sean, have heard of HARP, but that's only one installation. HARP is an ionosphere heater, a massively powerful ground-based radio frequency transmitter. They're all over the globe now, and these transmitters manipulate the electrically conductive particles, the heavy metal particles like from aluminum, barium, strontium, and they manipulate these particles to manipulate the weather. But the damage being done is immense and unquantifiable, and everything they spray in the atmosphere comes down to the ground, of course, and we breathe it. And we see the human disease markers, autism, COPD, Alzheimer's, the list is endless. Everything we would associate with exposure to these heavy metals is going off the charts. And so, again, this is nothing less than an all-out assault against the web of life, Sean.
Yeah, and I just want to back you up here and say that it is quantifiably provable. We have the NASA documents, we have the Air Force documents, that this spraying is occurring and has been occurring. And when they're putting aluminum and barium and these other metals in the skies, Dane, we're all breathing that in. That stuff is all in our blood now, isn't it?
Absolutely is. And every human test subject, hair, blood, urine, for heavy metals testing shows off the scale levels of these metals. It's important if people blood test that they know how to do this properly. Most physicians, most mainstream physicians don't know how to do this. There's pre-test protocol that's essential to chelate, to make those metals mobile in your system so that they show up on the blood test, because those metals tend to adhere to cell receptors like a plaque. And when you mix all these metals together, Sean, again, we know primary element in climate engineering is aluminum, because aluminum has certain properties that are advantageous to climate engineering, but massively destructive to anything that's alive. And when you start mixing these metals like aluminum with other metals like mercury, which we know is in the atmosphere already from coal-fired power plants, we have mercury in our mouths, many of us, from amalgam fillings. We have vaccines with mercury. You mix these metals together, Sean, and you have what's called synergistic toxicity. The lethality of that mix goes exponential. And in the case of aluminum and mercury, the combination of those two metals can make overall toxicity as much as 100 times worse. That's 10,000% worse. So it's a very lethal mix we're exposed to. It builds up in the human system. The human body is very resilient, but when it reaches its breaking point, breakdown occurs very quickly. And we're seeing that throughout the biosphere, throughout the web of life.
All right, well, I want to talk about the web of life breaking down, but first, I really think it's important that we talk about the idea of eugenics. You said, and I believe that you're right, this is a malevolent program. Climate engineering is malevolent in nature. These programs have multiple strategies behind them, don't they? It's not all about the sun. It's not all about trying to slow, quote, global warming or prevent climate change, quote unquote, climate change. There are multiple vector points here that we need to talk about. Humanity is under attack, Dane. And so when you talk about all of these metals being in our blood, I start to think of transhumanism, and I start to think of the other ways in which the elite want to shape this planet into a vision that does not reflect the Creator's beauty, right? And I think they're doing a heck of a job, Dane. So why don't you take us through the multiple strategies that are behind this? Because if they're malevolent in nature, then evil must be at the root of these programs to at least some degree.
Everything you stated is on target, Sean, and especially your point that we can't try to put what's happening in our skies into one category. And I try to stress this point over and over. There are many, many agendas being carried out at once. Too many people want to, again, label it as just an effort to cull populations or other eugenics aspects. That is not the only part of what's going on. And as far as eugenics being an effect of this, there's no arguing that. We know how toxic these materials are. We know they know, and they're continuing to carry out these programs. So one can't argue that this certainly has very grim ramifications, if you will. But there are many, many things going on at once. Climate engineering should be considered weather warfare. And because of the toxic materials, we must also consider it biological warfare. And this is what we face at this point. So if we're going to prioritize, Sean, and I know we face converging catastrophes from every direction, but the reason I've chosen this fight to focus everything on is because this is the most dire and most immediate threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm, period. And in regards to the climate, for those who are not looking at the overall picture on the climate and how damaged the climate system is because they're caught on people like Al Gore, who is not an honorable man. He's part of the criminal cabal. Al Gore is a con artist. The carbon credit trading is a sham, but that doesn't mean the climate's not damaged. And I compare warfare to that, Sean. We know that the same people make money off both sides of every conflict. Yes?
Yes.
They make money off wars, and no matter which side we're talking about here. So, but that doesn't mean the wars didn't happen, does it? The wars happened, people died. Same is true with the climate system. It's horrifically damaged, getting worse by the day, many causal factors, but geoengineering at the top of the list. The planet can't respond to the damage done because the climate system itself is being completely derailed. So I would argue again, if Earth's life support systems are damaged beyond any repair or recovery, isn't that the end of the road?
Yeah, and I want to just jump in and say, we're traveling through space here on Spaceship Earth, and the hull has been breached. Our life support systems are beginning to fail. You noted in your most recent GeoWatch radio broadcast that there was snow on Guadalupe Island in the Caribbean while it was raining and 40 degrees at the North Pole. We're seeing absolute weather chaos. Dane, we are on a slippery slope into the abyss, and as you've said many times, the ecosystems and biosphere upon which our lives depend are completely collapsing. So, Dane, what are we going to do to reverse this? What are we going to do to save Spaceship Earth?
First, if I can back up on some of the points you just made, which are very valid points, for those that are attempting to fight climate engineering or are trying to be activists in this arena, it's imperative that they recognize that these snow events like Guadalupe Island are completely engineered. They're not natural. When snow starts at 50 and 60 degrees, how can anyone think that's natural? And so we have people that are trying to fight climate engineering that are accepting those events as being natural and thus repeating the same narrative that those in power would want them to repeat, that there's no damage done to the climate, that the planet's cooling even. You hear people reciting that narrative because they're looking at these engineered events and considering them natural. It's imperative that people who want to fight climate engineering recognize these cool downs are completely engineered, period. You can't go from 100 degrees to snow in one day, and we've seen this happen, Sean. In Amarillo, Texas, May 1st, 2013, all-time record high of 100 degrees, snowed the next day. You cannot have that kind of cool down without chemical ice nucleation, period. So it's imperative people do research, look at the data that we have from the front lines and understand these events are completely engineered. As far as what we do to try to stop these programs, Sean, I believe that there's only one way forward, and that is to reach critical mass of awareness. And why will that work? Why will that make a difference? Because the only chance we have is to stop these programs from the inside out, to reach a level of awareness where the families of those involved, military families, understand what their family member is involved with, so that those people receive the pressure that they should receive from their peers and their family to stop participating. We have to reach a critical mass of awareness, period, so that the media will cover us as well, because we're filing legal action, Sean. You know that, I think, right?
Yeah, you're filing legal action up in Canada, I believe, and that's a precedent-setting lawsuit, is it not?
Yes, the Canadian lawsuit was filed on March 9th, and that's moving forward. We're close to the commencement of the filing in the U.S. as well, and that will be a very complex document. It's much more complex than Canada, and that will help us to reach a critical mass of awareness. Again, that this is a credible lawsuit with credible data, and we need people to not sit down on the bench and think that someone else is carrying that ball forward so that they don't have to do anything. We need everyone on the playing field. We need everyone involved, everyone helping to share credible data on this issue so we can reach that critical mass of awareness, because that's really the only way we're going to go forward. Otherwise, media will continue to marginalize this. We'll have people in the military who are being told that they're engaged in some benevolent activity to save the planet, which couldn't be further from the truth. We need them to wake up to reality, Sean.
Yeah, and you've been carrying the ball, I don't want to say by yourself, Dane, but certainly you are the quarterback on the field in this arena, the geoengineering arena. And, my hat's off to you, because you've dedicated literally your life, your time, and your resources to exposing geoengineering and trying to wake up humanity. So tell us about these lawsuits. Who are they against, and what will they expose?
In Canada, the filing goes against the monarchy there, and that document can be seen in its entirety, Sean. If people go to geoengineeringwatch.org, They'll find that in the recent column where they can just search Geoengineering Watch Canadian lawsuit, and they'll find actual PDFs of those filings and the recorded confirmations of those filings. They can read the document themselves. In the U.S., it's much more complicated. Again, we have in the what's called a 60-day notice, which is the filing that names all the potential defendants that could be named in that suit. And that's a big list. DOD, DOE, EPA. There's a long, long list there. But what we can prove conclusively is that the contamination, the heavy metal contamination that's raining down in unimaginable quantities on all of us, is being hidden, intentionally hidden by agencies like EPA and water quality testing. We know this for a fact, and we can prove it. So once people understand that they are being exposed to highly toxic elements, and the agencies that they imagine will protect them are doing exactly the opposite. They're doing everything they can to hide this contamination from the public. And why would that be a surprise? What did we see after Fukushima? All the radiation testing sites on the western U.S. were shut down. Flint, Michigan, how hard did they try to hide that situation? The gas leak in Southern California, the Gulf of Mexico oil spill. This is business as usual. These agencies are tasked with hiding threats from the public, not disclosing them, and we intend to prove that.
And Dane, you actually are hitting right on one of my points here about agencies being corrupted. We've been talking a lot about the Department of Justice not prosecuting the big criminal banks and those that run those banks, like Lloyd Blankfein, after the 2008 crisis was caused by the criminality of the banks. And we know that the DOJ is corrupted and was working with the banks on coming up with a defense, and the defense was collateral consequences. We cannot put these people in jail and go after the banks because the collateral consequences to the rest of the economy would be too severe. So when we see entire agencies of government corrupted from within, the rot is at the top, Dane, and it trickles down throughout the whole system. The whole system becomes rotten. So what do we do to take our country, our nation, and humanity back? What do we do to save humanity from the iron grasp of these malevolent dictators?
Well, again, I think the first step in that direction, Sean, is for people to realize that they are literally in a fight for life right here, right now. And it's not off on the horizon. It's not over the next ridge. It's kicking the door in right now. Once people realize that and are willing to face the truth, because so many people at this point are not willing to. They can still go about their lives for the moment, even though the enemy is at the gate, if you will. And the reality is not going to continue much longer. The sooner we face reality, the more chance we'll have of salvaging something of the planet. Now, again, we must face the most dire priority first. Is this not the most catalyzing issue of all? If we could expose climate engineering to the world so that every single living individual would know they have been irreparably and intentionally poisoned by those in power. All these governments are in collaboration on this issue, that their soils, their farm fields, their waters, all have been contaminated in many ways irreparably by climate engineering. Would that not galvanize the global population in a common cause to come together to realize that we are not only expendable to those in power, but an increasing liability? And if we can galvanize global populations with that knowledge, I would argue it would drag everything else to the surface with it. Issues like 9/11 and issues that should be painfully obvious. I mean, how obvious is it that what's going on above our heads in the sky, Sean? I mean, how obvious is that? You see it clearly. I mean, how can anyone miss it? But many people do. They simply are trained to not recognize what should be obvious spraying going on above their heads, just like watching Building 7 and 9/11 collapse from an obvious demolition, and yet you have people who refuse to see that for what it is. So we need to have an issue that will wake people up. They can't hide from it. There's nowhere to escape from geoengineering. It's contaminating everything because it's global. If we can wake the population up to this, Sean, I would argue we'll drag a whole lot to the surface with it.
Yeah, it is obvious. And Dane, you know, I sent you pictures of what was going on in the skies above my town about a year ago, and you commented on those pictures. And of course, those pictures are evidence of climate engineering. And then my friends over at Daily Sheeple shared an article that I wrote about geoengineering, about CERN, and some other things. And then I noticed in the comments over at Daily Sheeple that one of the people said, the author of this article is insane. This is a form of insanity. Whoever wrote this is insane. He was talking about me. He was talking about me, talking about geoengineering and my concerns about what these elite are up to. Dane, there are people in the society that are completely asleep, and they're distracted by the Kardashians and NFL football and the NBA and the MLB. And your point's a good one. If we could wake everybody up, maybe we could reach a critical mass. But damn, it's hard to wake people up, Dane. People are sound asleep and happy as clams as long as they don't know the truth.
You're exactly right. And if they could remain in that place forever, they would, but they can't. Again, the walls are closing in at unimaginable speed. And I encourage everyone, please don't believe anything I'm saying. Please investigate. And we have too many people, even people who, again, are trying to fight climate engineering, are not looking at data every day. And you have to take your compass heading every single day. You have to look at frontline data so you understand what's really happening with the climate, so we can start to build bridges with other groups like the environmental groups who, Sean, so far have been unimaginably in denial on this issue. They want to stay in their bubbles. But because the biosphere is imploding, you can't hide from what's happening much longer. We have, again, half the barrier reef dying in the blink of an eye. We have temperatures going off the scale. You have heat waves in India right now killing hundreds of people. We have what's called the wet bulb effect. It's when the temperature and humidity reaches a certain point that's intolerable for the human organism. This is happening more and more. We had temperatures in Iraq last year, Sean, the heat index. Try to imagine this. In Iraq last year, the heat index reached 165 degrees. Now, how hot can it get? And again, this is not about Al Gore. It's about a damaged climate system from many causes, geoengineering making it worse, not better. They can create short-term cooling events, which people who want to fight geoengineering effectively need to recognize for what they are, engineered. Engineered short-term cooling events with chemical ice nucleation at the cost of an even worsened overall warming. The planet's in a runaway warming event right now, and that will be impossible to hide for much longer. So the people that are asleep, as you so correctly described earlier, they're going to be forced to wake up. And that's why this issue is different than any other. It's different than 9/11. It's different than all the issues that for many people are in the rearview mirror and they don't want to face it anymore. Can't hide from this issue. It's killing us all and it's tearing the planet's life support systems apart.
All right. Well, we've covered geoengineering pretty thoroughly here. And now I just want to get your thoughts on Fukushima because, again, we are under a multi-vector attack. When I say we, I mean humanity. And I look at what's going on in Fukushima. My God, if you've looked at the debris, the bags of waste, over 1 million bags of radioactive waste sitting on the coast of the Pacific, Dane. They have no place to put the stuff. They have no way to fix what happened to Fukushima reactors 1, 2, and 3, all of which went into total nuclear meltdown. We're talking about a Chernobyl event on steroids. And now the Pacific appears to be dying off. I've got researchers in this area that I follow closely. We post their information. Dana Durnford, Kevin Blanche, my friend Lonnie, my friend LeBay over at Nuclear Hot Seat. We've got many activists covering Fukushima. They're not really concentrating on the geoengineering aspect of the threat to humanity, though. So what do you think is doing more damage to the Pacific right now? Is it geoengineering? Is it climate warfare, or is it Fukushima? Because we're seeing dead tide pools. We're seeing absolutely empty tide pools on the California coast. We're seeing dead sea life, dead starfish, dead sea lions, dead whales, all the way up the west coast into Canada. Complete die-off, Dane. And Fukushima needs to be talked about, but I know geoengineering is your main focus. Are they both doing us in?
Yes, let's weave those two issues together, Sean. This is an extremely important line of questioning. Fukushima is every bit as bad as what you described, but on the die-off in the Pacific, that die-off is much more directly related to other impacts with climate engineering at the head of the chain of events, if you will. Climate engineering has destroyed the ozone layer. We have unimaginably intense UV radiation now slaughtering plankton, the base of the food chain. So we have plankton populations around the globe plummeting. We have oceans that are warming at unimaginable pace and stratifying, what's called Canfield Ocean. And even though these organisms are absolutely exposed to the radiation, as you correctly described, that does not kill with the speed that we see organisms dying. For example, when the fish all float up, we have these massive fish kills happening. That is much more directly related to oceans that are warming at an unimaginable pace, and that thaws formerly frozen gas deposits on the seabed like methane and hydrogen sulfide. Those massive gas fields release, deoxygenates the ocean. The fish float up immediately. You have fish dying from Fiji to Florida right now. So again, you have issues that are much more directly related in the immediate sense of the die-off to other factors. Now, this does not negate Fukushima at all. Let's marry the two issues together. with the ozone layer being destroyed by climate engineering, now we're much more susceptible to a CME, a coronal mass ejection, massive solar flare, like the Carrington event in the 1800s. So what happens now? The geoengineering has destroyed our protective layers of the atmosphere. When we have a massive solar flare, grids shut down, electrical power grids shut down, and we'll have nuclear plants going into meltdown all over the globe. So these two issues are, in fact, very connected. And I respect the work that a lot of these researchers you just described are doing, and it's very important work. But these issues are, in fact, connected. And even the same weapons of war that may, in fact, data indicates were used to actually perhaps trigger the seismic event in Japan are the same ones being used in climate engineering. So you can't separate these two. We have MIT. Sean, you know who MIT is, I'm sure.
Oh, of course.
One of the most recognized research institutions in the world, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has stated on the record, and anyone can look up what I'm saying, that the atmosphere heated anomalously in the days before the Fukushima quake directly above the epicenter. That's exactly what we would expect to happen when you have the concentrated power of ground-based ionosphere heaters focused on one central location. We know from scientific data that the transmission of these radio frequencies into the Earth's strata can cause seismic activity under the right circumstances. Why would we not think that these issues are all related when we have institutions that credible of institutions speaking about atmospheric heating that they can't explain? So, and we have Japan. If we connect the dots geopolitically, Sean, Japan was starting to ally with its regional partners, and after the Fukushima incident or the Japanese quake, they were 100% in the U.S.'s pocket again. So, are these issues perhaps not all related when we see that kind of data from that credible of an institution?
Yeah, and of course we know about MIT and how they threw Aaron Swartz under a bus. And I'll tell you what, you guys want to do a little research on a freedom fighter who lost his life. I think he was taken out, but of course they said he committed suicide. Research Aaron Swartz and what MIT and the powers that be did to him, targeting truth teller. That's what they seem to be good at, Dane. This system seems to be very good at targeting truth tellers, shutting truth tellers up. We continue to see people who are telling the truth die young, and the demons that run this planet seem to live forever. Henry Kissinger, David Rockefeller, both these guys are pushing 100. I think David Rockefeller is now past 100 years old. The demons seem to run amok while good men die young. And look at JFK, look at Martin Luther King, look at Malcolm X. Look at all the truth tellers who die young, Dane. And the demons run amok. It's very frustrating. And I should just mention, too, I'm on a rant here, but I should just mention that you scared the pants off of me the first time I ever heard you speak. I believe it was on Coast to Coast. I could be wrong about that. But you were talking about the extinction level event that will occur when all of the methane trapped in the oceans escapes. And I think you were talking about the North Pole, the Antarctic. If ever we have a total ice melt, all of that methane will be released, and then we're done for. Do you want to address that just a bit?
I do. First, I want to back up to confirm what you just stated about the institutions like MIT and how they are bought, sold, and paid for by the power structure. You're exactly right. We do still have, fortunately, people within these institutions that occasionally get some truth out before they're shut down. So from MIT, we also have recent study that indicates that in 9 years or less, every other child will have autism. So even though these institutions are, again, as hijacked as you described, we do get occasional blasts of truth from people who get the data out before they're shut up, if you will. So we need to try to protect the people that are at least attempting to tell the truth, so they don't end up like Schwartz, as you stated. On the extinction level events, Sean, it's not coming; it's here. Again, these are statistics that I try to repeat over and over. We are in the sixth great mass extinction now, well into the sixth great mass extinction. We've lost 60% of Earth's wildlife populations in the last 40 years. 60%, nearly 60% in 40 years. We're losing, it appears, 2 to 300, but closer to 300 species of plant, animal, and insect a day to extinction. That's 15,000 times background rates. It's here now. And it appears we may have had perhaps as much as a 60 gigaton methane release in the Arctic either has happened or is happening right now from the East Laptev Sea. Methane is covering the planet like a layer of glass right now. Climate engineering in their attempt to hide that situation, Sean, is making it far worse, not better. And to put this into mathematical perspective, there's enough methane in the Arctic alone to create a Permian-style mass extinction on planet Earth 100 times over. There's enough to turn the planet into Venus. And if we don't face these issues now, if the population doesn't wake up, mathematically speaking, we have no chance. If we don't change direction very, very quickly, we have no chance. On the near-term horizon, I'm not talking about centuries down the road. I'm talking about near-term total global extinction as a mathematical certainty if we don't change direction.
Yeah, and before we let you go, Dane, I just want to do a little real-life experiment here. I'm going to raise the window here. I'm on the second floor of my home, and behind the house, the window's going up right now. Behind my home is a wooded area. You and I have talked about this before. This area behind my home 5 years ago, 6 years ago, was teeming with life, with birds so loud that I would have to keep the windows shut in order to conduct interviews. I'm going to put the microphone right up to my screen. What you hear right now is the sound of silence, Dane. It's a beautiful spring day, and there's not a bird in sight, nor are there any sounds of birds. I do see some squirrels from time to time, and the occasional woodpecker. I see a few birds now and then, but what used to be teeming with life is now, Dane, I'm not kidding you, there's at least a 70 to 80% decrease in bird activity behind my house compared to 5 or 6 years ago.
Again, when you look at what's happening at the bottom of the food chain, just like what's happened in the ocean, the same thing is happening terrestrially. In Shasta-Siskiyou counties in Northern California, we've seen a 90% decline. This is as measured by Forest Service biologists that I work with. 90% decline in aquatic and terrestrial insects in 10 years. If there's no food, everything else dies down the line. If the insects can't make it, how long will we be here, Sean? Period. And people need to decide why they're here. Why are they here? Is it about their personal pursuit of pleasure, or is it about preserving some sort of future for their children? People need to wake up and show some responsibility toward the whole, toward what they're a part of. Now is when we find out what we're made of, Sean.
Amen. Well, Dane, I want to support you. I know the listeners are very supportive of our guests. We've helped a couple of authors recently get their books onto the Amazon bestseller list. How can we support you? I know you're doing so much of this out of pocket. First of all, I can tell people visit geoengineeringwatch.org and listen to GeoWatch Radio, which is absolutely commercial free. Dane, tell us more. I believe you have a donate button on your site too. How do people help support you to get the word out and put an end to this?
Anything people choose to contribute to the cause goes 100% in the fight. Our commercial DVDs, our flyers, which we've distributed 250,000 color glossy flyers, about 8,000 commercial DVDs. We give everything away. We don't sell anything. At events, everything is given away. So they can help us through geoengineeringwatch.org through the donate button if they choose. Also, we have a separate tax-deductible nonprofit fund for the attorney effort, and that's also available if they search geoengineeringwatch.org legal Stop Geoengineering Legal Defense Fund. And that's a separate fund, and that's, again, 100% tax deductible. They can help our legal fund as well. And the attorneys, by the way, Sean, are working pro bono, but they still have expenses that we're trying to cover. I mean, these attorneys know that they're going down in the same ship with the rest of us. They're donating their time, but there are expenses there too. So if they choose, they can donate directly to the legal fund, again, which is 100% tax deductible. So everything we acquire goes 100% into the fight, Sean.
Well, do me a favor then, Dane. Please send me the link to the Legal Defense Fund. I will make sure that I put that in the more info section right below this interview so people listening in the moment can go there and easily find it, as opposed to going to your website and trying to find it. I think it's easier if we put it in the more info section. So please send me that link. And the last thing I want to say is let's leave on just a bit of good news. I think we just did. There's attorneys that are donating their time, which is a act of benevolence. It's an act of generosity. And boy, what great news. But let's leave people with one more bit of good news. There are people out there running for office now that want to help and who are aware and willing to talk about this issue. Who is Jeffrey Gerlach? He's running for Congress.
He is, and he's very articulate, and he's willing to face the geoengineering issue head on. So anybody that's in his district in Northern California would encourage to support Jeffrey Gerlach. And we need people like that in office, certainly, but we still must reach critical mass. And as people are trying to help reach critical mass, Sean, I would encourage them to arm themselves with credible data. Keep flyers with you. You can download from geoengineeringwatch.org. You can download our flyers for free, print them locally. That's much, much more effective with waking others up than just trying to orally convey this message or point at the sky and rant. So arm yourself with credible data, help us to reach critical mass, send out credible data to others. We have the flaming arrow link at geoengineeringwatch.org. You can mail to groups, individuals, and organizations that would care if they knew. Learn how to be effective and look at the horizon, look at new data that's breaking every day so that you have a correct compass heading. Help us to effectively sound the alarm.
All right, guys. Well, I think you've had the privilege of listening to a modern-day Paul Revere, Dane Wigington of Geoengineeringwatch.org, a truth teller and a friend of humanity. Dane, thank you very, very much for what you're doing and what you continue to do, and thanks so much for spending so much time with us today.
Thank you, Sean. My gratitude to you. It's a team effort. It's all of us working together that matters. So this is something that, again, each of us can play a part in if we simply put one foot in front of the other and take the steps necessary to share with others. So again, my gratitude to you, Sean. It's a team effort getting the word out.
Well, thanks, Dane. And guys, bookmark it. It's geoengineeringwatch.org. Send the link to your friends, family, colleagues. Wake people up. We all have to get in this fight. Dane, thanks again. And guys, check out GeoWatch Radio. It's commercial free. You can find that on geoengineeringwatch.org. And thank you so much for your support at sgtreport.com. Real news, 24/7, the antidote to corporate propaganda. And check us out at thelibertymill.com as well. Thanks for listening.